Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Douville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who was bred to sleepwalk through life until he was activated by a simple phrase.
Tim Longo.
I'm not going to say the phrase because it involves killing puppies, which we were just discussing on pre-show.
Oh boy.
But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So we need to build up to killing puppies. I'm sure there were like goldfish and lizards and things that you had to kill first, because you always want some sense of progression in your character's backstory.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the section where everything is laid bare. This is, a lot of people I think have said this is where the game should have stopped to some degree.
Yeah.
Which I don't entirely disagree with, mostly because I don't feel like what it builds to later is particularly good, to be honest. I mean, endings are hard, and I get it. But also there's definitely a counterpoint here that was being played, and you have to pay off on the other half, right? So I do get it, and I just think the actual ending that they arrived at is there are things I like about it. I like that there's a good ending and a bad ending. I like that the bad ending is, if you harvest any of the little sisters, that's bad. I remember at the time people being like, well, shouldn't there be like a medium ending if you harvest only a few? And I'm like, you're a monster. What's wrong with you? But I guess we'll get to all of that stuff.
That'll be next session.
Yeah. We can talk about all the ups and downs of what's coming. But yeah, this section basically, for most of it, builds up to the encounter with Andrew Ryan. And before we get to the mechanical stuff, we should probably just talk some of this big story beat and sort of what immediately follows, which is, you get to meet your dad, and would you describe it as a heartwarming reunion?
Yeah, very blood warming. Blood. What's the phrase? No, I don't know. It's blood gushing reunion. I mean,
everybody wants to go out and swing the irons with their dad, right? I mean,
sure, yeah, and it's a wooden iron, no less, so it's got a little bit of a retro feel to it.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, so leading into the meeting, there's the typical reactor level, which they found a great, their great version of seems like every game like this needs a reactor. And even though we're not in a spaceship, a la System Shock 2 or something, they definitely found a way to do it. And, this reactor is mining into the depths of the magma of below the ocean floor, which is a cool concept, because, there's sort of like, there's great fiction as well as even science, about sort of how lava and the ocean interact with each other and stuff. But so that was kind of cool. But what I really want to talk about with the lead in is that, like, starting this, because we just finished the Cohen stuff, right? So there's sort of a good demarcation there. And then you start this section, you immediately go into the Ryan areas, which is essentially leading to, I guess it's Hephaestus. It's leading to his office. It's the core, et cetera, et cetera. But they definitely are bending over backwards to try to up the ante for you now, because not only are there more enemies and harder enemies, but there's a lot more. Well, I mean, I guess it's been gruesome the whole way, but I feel like you come into that courtyard area that's leading to his office, and there's just bodies, strung up and just and it's like,
yeah. I mean, they've been playing him abstractly as monstrous in a way, right? They've been saying he's cracking down. A lot of if you get tapes of him, he says things that are very classist, and very
Yeah.
I mean, he clearly doesn't think a lot
Elitist.
of people, who make less money than him or have less vision, I guess is how he put it. So they've painted him abstractly as a monster, and they have some characters who are maybe from sort of the underclass, or like, well, not even that, but like, I'm thinking of like was it Snow Chaser? What was that thing with the train that goes around the world? But whatever. Snow Piercer.
Yeah.
And like the same sort of classist things are happening there. And there are people who are like, who work for the machinery, right? There's this engineer who's describing all the mechanisms of Hephaestus. Right. And you're sort of getting from him like, oh yeah, he's really cracking down, but you get that for a while before you actually see what cracking down looks like in non-abstract, concrete terms.
Yeah. Yeah, and it feels like they ratcheted up because, I mean, from a pacing perspective, it's interesting because, to your point, they're showing Ryan through a certain lens this whole time, and he definitely seems like a villain and sinister and gone off the deep end and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, his society has crumbled. But you've been focused on various other characters, evil characters up to this point, right? Like not only the mini bosses, and he's intermixed in there, but like you said, it's largely philosophical, in a way, you know what I mean? And there's definitely some recordings that were obviously optional that you could get some more like harsh, like gruesome, events coming from Ryan specifically, things that he did. But when he's talking to you directly, he is very like eloquent and, I don't know, charming, or, like he seems he's coming off in a certain manner. And then you come into here and it feels like they're really trying to like, oh no, this guy's he's bad. Like he's a bad dude. So you're going to want to take him down.
He's done actual harm, right?
Yeah.
We might hate this ideology, but did it really harm anyone? Right. Would be the sort of question you might have before this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not too much because of Jasmine Jolene, where it definitely seems like, oh yeah, actually he's a really bad dude. Right, with the
if but that was even an optional thing. Like
that's optional.
You may not have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they do. If you go scour stuff, you can find plenty of things to indicate that he is monstrous, right? I mean that that this ideology that he espouses leads to some really, really bad ends because he wants to do anything to support it, to make it possible that it be true, right? Never see any analogs of that in the real world. I say on a day when Facebook was down, just after a whistleblower gave a report to 60 Minutes.
Pretty crazy. Yeah, crazy. That's a crazy relevant playing this game. So I mean, I just wanted to make note of like the ratcheting up of that, right? Because it's only really minutes or maybe hour or so before you get to the point that we're talking about with him. And you need to be in a certain, I mean, for that to really pay off, you kind of need to be in a certain state of mind, right? For that to happen. So they got to like ratchet it up fast.
Right.
And so there's an overall kind of macro pacing, thing to keep an eye on there for them. But, this is the other reason that so you go through, you deal with the core, which is essentially like shutting it down, and then he turns on the self-destruct and things have gotten all haywire, and then Atlas sends you to go get him, of course, and you need to turn the self-destruct off and etc. But really you need to get to Ryan to I think he tells you to take him out, right? He's been telling you that all along.
Yeah, that's been Atlas's goal all along, but even Ryan at that point would rather you kill him than he give in, basically, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because I didn't remember the particulars of that, but that scene, so when you come into the room, there's a glass to his office, there's a glass between you and him where they have a great, and I do vividly remember that scene still from playing it back then, where you come into that and you come out of a vent and you come into a room, I think first, where you see the sort of the red string, the red thread board, right? With
Yes.
with the Would You Kindly on
Right.
it, and all of the connections, and including what I assume is your own face, picture of you, your character there, which I think is one of the first times you see that. And you're kind of like, what does this mean? You know, a little bit of this was, oh, what did we already say Portal came out the same year as this?
Yes, I believe.
Oh,
so,
how
right?
funny.
Yeah, that opens this year.
The parallels then of some of the story stuff is interesting. But anyway, so you come out and you're like, Would You Kindly, huh? What's the, and that's interesting. And then you get to this window and you see him and he's there just like monologuing, playing golf.
Yeah.
And then he opens the door, and you know, it's
that so reminds me, by the way, just like the way he's sort of I don't know, paternalistic, I'd say. It totally reminds me of like Walt Disney introducing.
I was just going to say that.
Were you really? Oh
yes,
my God. Yeah. It's exactly like that from Wide World of Disney or whatever when it was on TV.
Oh yeah.
We're I mean, I'm younger than Tim, but you know, he's quite old. And so I'm, you know, a bit younger and all that, but yeah, I mean, he used to do this show for years, and would have started in the 60s, I guess, maybe even the late 50s, where he presented all these kind of shorts and materials that Disney already had in its huge library. Like the model was already working back then, you know, of different stuff that they had. And he'd introduce it each week on the Wide World of Disney, you know, what each show was about, you know, sort of like they've done with some Pixar stuff or the Ghibli stuff, like there's the same model there of like, you know, having an American say, oh, you're so, you know, I don't want to mention who specifically because of his conduct, but you know, introducing something, saying, oh, you're about to see this, and oh, I love it for these reasons, and this character does this, whatever. And it's just like that. You know who I'm talking about.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, like Ryan doesn't look too dissimilar from Disney, right? I mean, there were times when Disney had a you know what are those mustaches called? A pin. No. Anyway, those real thin mustaches. His suit, pencil thin. Yeah. His suit, right? So I mean, he's of a kind of a sort of ilk of that sort of like,
and just like the a
little bit of Citizen Kane in there, maybe.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, for sure.
Some Hearst. Yeah.
Yep.
Which, I mean, if you've ever been to Hearst Castle, it's like if you put that underwater, it's basically rapture.
As far as I can tell. I'm literally reading a book about a woman who designed the only real monster in Hollywood, designed by a woman, who also her father worked at Hearst Castle. So the connections tonight, we're just on the same wavelength.
Wow. Yeah. So that scene is very memorable. And then I guess, like you said, he basically, like, I didn't really completely follow his logic, but he opens the door, and the bummer about it, which I guess is the only way you really should do it, because you don't really want to be the one probably pressing the button, but you know, you lose control basically. Once the door opens, you're not really, you can't even move your camera, which is a little bit of a bummer. I don't think you can.
No, you can't. You're locked in. And actually, I think it's actually it presents a real problem for this sort of thing the game's been doing all along, which is this Would You Kindly thing, right? That I don't see how else functionally you could do it, to be clear, like for what it has to do, like to leave it in the control of the player. The player walks away. What do you do? Right. I mean, does the game just end? Like, I don't know. I guess maybe that's what you do, right? Is you just
you do need to get a key off of him, and you've gotten keys off of people before that you've had to kill. So they just, I don't know if they just wanted you to see it in a specific way
and frame it, that particular way, and make it shocking and gory, and
I guess. But I don't know if it's a better version. Like, I think it's a pretty horrific version if you're the one pressing the button. However, if they wanted to make an impression, they should have made you press the button. You know, like there's no, I don't know. It's a horrific
Well,
Like there's there's probably a world where they said, oh, we better not, we better just do it ourselves, because it's pretty rough, it's pretty gruesome at the time. But I don't know, it's a gruesome game, but
I mean, it's I wonder if this is like, No Russian, right? Which is a couple of years later. I was actually looking that up because I couldn't remember exactly.
Oh yeah.
But
well, and there's also like I don't want to do any spoilers, but there's some really recent games. There's a couple recent games where there's similar, like, no, you need to do this. Last of Us 2 being one that I won't get specific about, but
right. Without giving details, I do know that you have to. Yeah. I'm aware of that. Yes. Yeah.
And there's a little bit of it in Death Stranding too. So, which is not surprising for Kojima, but anyway, yeah. So, it's still impactful, and I don't think I'll ever forget that window scene where he's just there, and you're like, wow, that's him. He's right there. Yeah. And then like you said, they're peeling the onion now, and he starts telling you about your past, and all the flashbacks you've been having kind of are playing more frequently. And then he talks about "Would you kindly," and of course that plays into killing him, and his sort of self-sacrifice, where he's gone so far off the deep end that he's now admitting that this is the only path, and talking about like, you had so much potential and you were my greatest disappointment, or something like that. Yeah. I don't remember all the
happy paternalistic things he says. Right. And he's also he's playing into this, he's trying to make himself into a tragic figure because he I'm sure sees himself that way. Right. At that point, it's like, I tried totally. So hard to make this all work. Yeah.
The ego.
And his ego won't allow him to let go. And I think that makes him pretty well drawn. I mean, I think we can imagine characters in literature and things like that who are like that. Right. I mean, it's a pretty, I would say tropey, but it's also very human. Right. There's plenty of people who rationalize doing very crazy things, right? Because they have a belief.
Lots of
and they
examples.
Can't go against that belief. Yeah, lots of examples lately, right? I was not wanting to go there, with veterinary supplies and things, but like, it's a real thing, right? And it's a real human thing, and we've probably all done it. Like, I'm sure. I mean, I know I've done it. I know I have had times where I know Tim wouldn't believe this of me, but I can sometimes be stubborn, and hold to something.
Yeah, sure. No, we all. It is human.
That you have to learn that about me at this point.
I am flabbergasted, and to be honest, you're right. I think it's well put that there's a human element to it. I think Andrew Ryan, for all of his faults as a character, will still be maintained as one of the most memorable characters in a video game for sure. As far as the way that he's kind of built up and presented. And I'm not obviously saying that he's a good guy. I'm just saying the character is memorable from a fictional standpoint. But it's what is the saying? Every villain is the hero of their own story, or something like that. And I feel like that's really how he thinks he succeeded, and
all the themes are Greek, right? All the level areas are named after Greek gods, right?
Right, yeah, good point.
So it really pulls in that sort of mythological framework of how big these characters are meant to be, right? And Atlas, right, is the name of the enemy, or the friend, but he's the Titan,
frenemy.
Right? The frenemy, who's been working against you this whole time. You didn't even know. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of playing at that level, or trying to. And I think he's memorable. I mean, I think when the light kind of flickers on and, you see him behind that glass, you're like, oh man. It's like, it is a great moment. And I gather they actually started with that to some degree, like that is something they spent a lot of time getting right.
Sure. Yeah.
I ran across one of the director's commentaries. You can find them in the remaster, and I started playing it. I think I was having something to eat at the time, so I'm like, you know what? I'll watch this for a little while I eat. And and they go into things like that, like, oh yeah, we knew we had to get that really, really right. That was really, really important to nail how we did it. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's a tough thing to do, to know the player has no choice, like, because the story can't continue. You can't wrap up your game otherwise, and it's always just tough. Like, there's a similar thing in one of the Arkham games. It might be the last one where you take control of Catwoman for a while, and
you do that in you might in Night as well, but you do that in City as well.
Yeah, sure. Where she has the opportunity to walk away, and just leave Bruce Wayne in whatever fix that he's in that she can save him from. And I think it's Night, and you can walk away, and the game just ends. Like,
yeah,
and it's
well,
like,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think there's various things they could have done. It's still a great sequence. I'm not trying to pick it apart or anything, but
yeah.
But I kind of fear that and it's the same problem that Kojima has as well, that when they say we know we had to get this right, I think they're saying, I worry that they're saying that. I have no evidence of this. I didn't watch the director's commentary or know their intention, but I worry that they're saying we need to get this right in a cinematic way.
Yeah.
And I just wish that that they were more thinking about it from an interactive way, because I think it could have been more impactful. And we have the debate about the little sisters as well, right? The sort of like false choice there.
I think now that I think about it, there is really the possibility of a choice there where you can walk away, like you could walk away from Sander Cohen.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think you could do like something with a quick time, sort of thing where he's like shaking you, and so you have the opportunity, and they can lock the camera and all that stuff and do all that, but you could still not do it, and then he could be paternally disappointed in you, throw you to the ground.
Yeah.
And then basically take his own life or something like that, right?
Or like Atlas could have come in at that point and introduced himself then, right? And like had not physically, but like sent.
Thanks, kid. You opened the doors for me.
Yeah, exactly. Big Daddy comes in and does some nonsense. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, but anyway, yeah, it's still memorable. Yeah, I mean, this is like The Cake is a Lie. This is, ironically, the biggest, another big example of that for the same year, where it just boggles my mind that when we say the words "would you kindly" to most gamers, what it does psychologically. And I think that is that's once in a generation kind of, hit there.
Yeah.
Emotional hit. So, and it culminates in this. So then you do that. I also think the voice work for the voice actor that played Ryan was quite good for that sequence too, including the death, which was pretty gruesome. And then you go through, and then what happens?
Fontaine reveals himself, because you've got first you take this key, and he's, would you kindly take this genetic code thing over to central processing unit in next room or whatever, and Fontaine basically lets you know that he's been playing you the whole time. Then confirms he slowly drops the Atlas voice to be kind of, and this is itself so classist, but he becomes much more of a thuggish Irishman than a leprechaun Irishman, to really put it about as crassly as I really can, because that's really what's happening here. He's like, he's in one moment he's this charming Irish character, who you'd give your last nickel to, and then becomes just this absolute mobster thug, like De Niro in The Irishman or something like that, where it's just like, and now this is a really bad person. And they do that a lot through voice, and his and it feels so like it's, and on the one hand it's not bad, and games are Hawaiian shirts, right? I get it. Like they're making it, they're just playing on archetypal beliefs, but those are not necessarily great things to think, right? So it's
well, I mean, I think so. I mean, this is my personal experience, but and I don't know if this is really would ring true with others, but Ryan is a way more like almost forgot about Fontaine until playing this game again, right? Like he did not. I remember Atlas because of the reversal, or the twist rather. But Fontaine specifically, like I don't even remember him.
He's kind of a nobody, really. Yeah,
he doesn't stick in my head. He's 2-dimensional. He's, he's like the worst kind of villain. He's like a weird racist, like I don't know what, classist, like and fairly rote, kind of character. And it's too bad because I think the twist in the revert, the reveal is still quite cool. Of course, you've got it revealed to you from Ryan as well. So I don't know. It's just the other thing that I just forgot about with Fontaine is that they mention him kind of as a bit of a legendary figure, kind of a little bit throughout the game up to this point. But
yeah, I mean,
feel like they could have done more.
That he's a thug, Yeah, I agree with that. Like if they had leaned into him more. A little bit more, maybe they just didn't want to give away the game.
I get. I mean, it's definitely hard. Like, I'm not like. Don't get me wrong. Like, they did a better job than I probably could have done. So I'm not saying. I'm not throwing stones. I'm trying not to throw stones, but because it's super difficult. But I guess all that being said, the fact that Atlas turns out not to be Atlas is very cool and a very neat reversal there, and kind of it all. Oh, that's the other thing I want to say is that the funny thing about like leading you to Ryan and what Atlas wanted you to do this whole time, Fontaine being sort of the nemesis, Ryan's nemesis, I guess, so to speak. But then it's sort of a little deflated in the fact that Ryan wants you to do it anyway. You know what I mean? It's like he didn't. Like if you would have found your way there without Atlas, would it have resulted in the same thing? You know what I mean? Sort of like, again, a false choice kind of situation or something. Because Ryan like, no, go ahead, take me out. It's like, wait, what? So did Fontaine actually, you know what I mean? Did Fontaine actually succeed? Would it?
I mean, I think the counter argument would be like, look, only by Fontaine pushing you and playing you would you think of Ryan as the monster that he was, at least to get to the point where you see that he's hung bodies on the walls, right? Because he apparently kills Atlas's family right in front of you, right? And in front of Atlas, right? Atlas is down there too, I think, in that scene, or in theory, like who actually knows? But I mean, I think
that was muddy. I was wondering how real that was. So was that really Fontaine's family then too?
No. There was no family. There was no family.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
No, there was no family. But I mean, I think that you are meant to, like, if Fontaine had not played you that way, where like Ryan is this monster, look what he does. Would you have wanted to go that far? Would you have wanted to go all the way from there to Hephaestus, right? I think would be the argument is like, Atlas is there to puff up Ryan as a monster, and he has to show you horrific things, even if Ryan is not actually responsible for them. But you have no way of knowing that. So he's playing you all down the line. It is his fisheries at the beginning too. And it's funny that Fontaine, there's always something fishy about Fontaine, I guess, but it's nice. It's pretty good stuff. I mean, that's true. There are really good things like that about it that feel like there's so much, like there's we've mentioned Greek mythology, and of course there's like the Art Deco and Walt Disney. I mean, that has to be Levine's like of a same generation as us. So I'm sure like that was in the back of his mind for that presentation, like this avuncular figure who shows up on your TV every week in the 70s or whatever, etc. Right? I mean, there's just layer upon layer upon layer of these references, plus the history and the World War II stuff that's coming in with Suchong and Tenenbaum, and I mean, just like there is so muchness, as far as when you say it's a generous game, it's also hyper generous with how many thematic elements it draws in, and I almost wish those were pared back a little bit because it's a lot, and I actually think it makes it a lot less clear what is it actually trying to say, right? You've got this objectivism as well, and like these other factors with the criminal element, and it's just a lot. It's just a lot. I mean, I guess it all boils down to, any given ideology works on paper, but we're human, so it turns out it doesn't work in practice, right? I think it's what it comes down to. Is kind of the big added together thing I would come up with from all that's there, but it's a lot of stuff to sift through. Anyway.
One line that I wrote down that I wanted to mention that Ryan says, as you're kind of opening the door to his, you're in that courtyard where the bodies are hung, as you're approaching. I think it's there that he says something like, all that matters to me is me, and all that matters to you is you. And that is what this is all about, or something like that. And I was just like, that's a good line. That's like, that really like boils all of it down into its core elements. And
that's very objectivist as well, right? I mean, that's very much, part of that, sort of pre-libertarian movement, right? And it just gave rise to modern libertarianism. Yeah,
and the thing that I love about it is it puts him specifically in the bucket that you assume that he is in, but then it really throws some turmoil to the player, as far as like, is that what I think? You know what I mean? Like what I'm going through and killing, like I'm playing this game, man. I'm pressing these buttons and I'm killing everybody. Like
I'm killing all these poor, insane people.
Yeah. And it's like, they're definitely insane, but they're still I don't know. It's like if you go too far down the hole,
there's as much people as you are. You've also had your genes rewritten by, by plasmids, right?
Yeah. So, who's the real villain?
Maybe you haven't really had maybe you haven't quite lost your humanity like they have, but that could be where you're going. There's a lot.
Well, and because
and that's just another layer. Like like I said, there's just so many layers. If this were a cake, it would have fallen over.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want too many layers in your cake. Be careful. There's a balance.
You have to do so much binding with frosting at that point, and then it's like all frosting. It's hard to do.
There is a lot of frosting in the game too, though. I mean, I think it's I don't know, Baroque in its
a German tort, for sure.
7-layer
German tort or something.
Right.
And now we're making cooking.
Well, I was going to say, like, it related to the objectivism and stuff, and sort of the villain. Are you the real villain kind of thing? The way I'm playing it, of course, with the little sisters and the big daddies, like, it is becoming increasingly difficult for me to kill the big daddies as I do it. Like, even though when I'm saving the little sisters, when I played the first time, obviously I'm killing them too, but for some reason this time, man, like killing them and their sounds, and they seem so innocent, and just,
well, they sound like the whales to some degree,
Yeah, and then also harvesting them, the little. So then, you get to Tenenbaum, I guess, if we move on to the next section.
Yeah, we should move on to Olympia Square and the sort of, I guess, sewer section or whatever that she's living in with the little sisters. It's actually interesting because I don't think over the course of the game, when you're rescuing them, that they are different. But when you actually get here, they are clearly different little girls. I mean, they're all modeled on a type, for sure.
They're not infected yet, right? The ones that you find here are still little girls. I don't think that they're. Are they the ones you've saved?
Oh, I thought they were the ones in my case that I had saved.
Well, I've not saved any.
Yeah, I know you haven't. So it's, I mean, the game has to allow for both, right? I think the implication is that these are the ones you're saving because they sort of gesture to you because they want to help you to escape.
Well, that's what they do for me too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you'd play that scene otherwise. Like,
No, they had to. Yeah, I guess.
yeah, I mean, they're kind of stuck with that. Well, I mean, without doing something entirely different where you just happen into this place. Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, she doesn't say that about them in my playthrough. So that actually, I guess, is left unclear in my, when you're playing rescue only, it's maybe not clear whether they are the little girls you've been rescuing or not. But clearly in the course of the game, they're all identical, which is one of the creepiest things I find about them, like the Village of the Damned or something like that.
I mean, I think they're
with all the identical girls.
Yeah, and some of them are, I think, blonde. Some of them are. I mean, they have different hairstyles or hair colors, but they're identical otherwise. Yeah,
and styles and dresses. They differentiate them as much as they can for the era and how much they could really reasonably spend on this one small section.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Now that I'm thinking about it, when I harvest them, they don't really address where the body goes. Or what happens to the little girl. It says harvest. Anyway, when you get there in my playthrough, they're saying things like, oh, he's the one who hurts us, or he doesn't like us very much. Stay away from him. So that's what their voice lines are saying when you're in that room with all of them, even though they still lead you out of the room as the critical path shows. But that's, so I don't know if they're speaking in a hive mind way or what it is, but they recognize who you are and that you're treating them badly.
Yeah.
In that case. Yeah. So then you meet Tenenbaum, and then I guess really the next mission is really just basically trying to get out from underneath the would you kindly, yeah. And they actually reference, which I forgot, and it's kind of interesting to think about. I don't know if it comes into play later, but the would you kindly mind control thing, they call it a mind control plasmid, I think, at some point. So it's interesting to think that it's actually just another plasmid that Fontaine, that is like
anybody could have, been given this thing. Yeah.
It's part of the same, it's part of the same chemical, like, I don't know, whatever, like science behind it.
Yeah. Suchong in his sort of descriptions basically does describe it that way. It's like he's basically taking the same technology and trying to find the right mix to be able to do that, which, of course, calls into question the hypnotized Big Daddy as well. Is that basically the same thing, right? I mean, because that's a mind control thing as well. And so she's basically removed that problem for you in the would you kindly, but he's just going to batten down the hatches every so often, is just going to turn the screw and make you lose health, maximum health or something like that. Which is an interesting balance to have to strike, right? To want to ramp up the difficulty and challenge and like the types of enemies. I think you're facing a lot more of the nitro slicers now, which are the ones with the bombs. And it's more elite Rosies and elite bouncers and things.
I feel like
so
everything has more health too. Like I feel like
the
regular splicers have health, but I could be wrong on that.
Your plasmids are stronger. Your weapons aren't. Your weapons are just, I mean, they a little bit, I guess, from the upgrades, but not necessarily. Those are sometimes very off the beaten path, so you may not have tons of those. So your weapons might not be all that great relative to other stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting tightrope to walk where they've got to really, we want it to still feel like you want for that to pay off of like, okay, the game's even more challenging now, but not so much that people are having difficulty actually finishing it. So it's another tightrope that the game has to walk. That's kind of strange, but anyway.
Yeah, and then I mean, I guess we can hit the random plasmid thing maybe next time that starts happening.
Yeah, we can go to it now. We're 40 minutes in. We're only talked about story stuff.
Yeah.
I actually, one of the things, so the whole like MacGuffin in this section is basically you have to find this chemical that will make him not able to dial down your health, and you'll be restored to health. But once you find it, or find half of it, because of course you never just find the whole thing, like the EMP bomb that you have to go out and find a ton of ingredients for and things. You never just find the one thing, which, I get. You actually have to go find part one here, and you learn that the other part, is somewhere else. And so you got to go, that's basically Apollo Square, I guess. But when you take the first dose, which, I'm not sure why you'd do that if you knew it was going to mess with you, especially after other plasmid stuff, but you do. You take it, and your plasmids start randomization, where they just start cycling through the plasmids, which I really kind of like. I mean, I don't love it playing it in a way, but theoretically I like it in that, hey, if I haven't seen all these plasmids that I haven't bought, like I haven't bought because I've played it before, like in Rage, and I don't know what other ones I haven't bought, but I haven't used probably some some plasmids. It's really cool to be basically forced to try to play the game with these plasmids, which I don't know. I think that is an interesting thing to throw at somebody.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a neat little mix it up. It's like a little bit of that Metroid, like a different spin on the Metroid moment, right? The proverbial Metroid moment. Instead of taking all your weapons away, they randomize them,
Yeah. They put them out of your control. So the normal ways you play are not there for you, which can be frustrating for some players. So it's a risky maneuver. Although they do give you, I think, the most powerful versions of all of them as well. I think, like, it's not just the ones you have, because I've definitely had one come up where I was like, oh, I don't have that one yet, and trying it out. It's just kind of neat. I forget which one it was, but it looked sort of like the hypnotized Big Daddy, but it was like a blue ball. I don't.
Yeah, the blue one. That one you mark. I actually do have that one. You mark enemies with it, and all of the security.
Right. Okay.
Robots will essentially target that.
Target
enemy.
Whatever you've hit with it.
So it's basically enraging, sort of like Enrage, but for robots.
For robots, right? Yeah, and Target Dummy is one I didn't have either, which puts out a fake one of you in the world, just like it did in Ratchet and Clank with the decoy gun.
Right.
So it's all kind of similar, familiar stuff in that way. Like none of them is necessarily really out there, but except maybe the bees. The bees is definitely the strangest thing in the game, I think, for.
There is the B section though in Arcadia.
Right. No, it's well motivated by the story, but it's just a weird power. Like I can shoot insects out of my hands. That's strange.
Oh, I see.
It's just kind of, it's not something I've seen a lot of, because it's actually, I have the highest version of it now, and it's not super effective. I mean, it's basically a stun lock
distraction. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't do a lot of damage. So it's like, oh, okay, well now I'm just going to switch back to a gun, I guess. Like, I don't know. I don't love it. I would love it if they did more, I guess. So anyway, I think that's neat. I think it's fun. And I do, I've played this several times. So I definitely remember kind of going through it and being like, oh man, if you do play this game on hard, having ways that you normally interact with the game suddenly lost to you can be really a challenge, and it's probably the most challenging the game ever gets in that sense, even though they give you fairly powerful versions of them. So I think it's good. I think it mixes things up pretty nicely. I enjoy it. It always makes me chuckle when it happens, like, ugh, like, come on, hasn't this guy played a video game before? But I guess not. It's 1959 or 61 or whatever it's supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that brings us up to about where we,
that's where we were supposed to stop, basically. Yeah, so we got through all the story stuff. I did kind of raise one thing in there about how I've upgraded the plasmid, one of my plasmids all the way, maybe two of them. I think I did Electrobolt as well to level 3. And I think that's as far as they go. I might be wrong about that, but I think it says that about the B one, the insect swarm. It's the most powerful insect swarm, and unfortunately, it didn't really work. That kind of stung. Anyway, we had kind of mentioned last time a little bit about how the upgrade systems in this were kind of simplified in that way, and I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that and what that means to you. I think it's one of the ways in which this game doesn't fully embrace the immersive sim aspects. And I think it's worth us kind of turning back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it, I think probably every session or every episode, and in the beginning, especially, where, their goal was sort of like bringing some of that immersive sim into a shooter, and they did want to make a good shooter first for the most part. And so, that's fine. But I think the upgrade system for me, it's really pretty collapsed down in as far as depth goes, and what I mean by that is, it's not skill tree related. There's not really any relationship to the upgrades to each other. It's really just a series of slots that you upgrade by opening up, and then a series of augmenters or mutators or whatever for increasing your abilities, whether, like we talked about last time, physical, technical, what have you.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, even the plasmids, like, you're not upgrading the plasmids themselves. You're just getting another object-oriented plasmid that happens to be better than the last one. Like a level 3 or something. And then you just put it into one of your slots, and you can move them around. They have no relationship. The previous ones essentially are obsolete. Though I guess technically,
I think they're gone. No, I don't think you can choose.
Oh, okay, right.
I think it literally just improves the one you have. But it's also the problem with it. The thing that I don't love about it is that it's basically just under the hood. Some numbers change for this one, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess in some cases, rather, it also extends to a wider variety of things. Maybe like bigger enemies can be affected by this or something like that.
Maybe, but it's not really revealed too much to you.
I was going to say none of that is really shown to you. And to be honest, I don't really care about that. Like, I don't really care to know the numbers. I'm not a guy who looks at a game that shows you all the numbers unless you maximize that way. I never really love that about a game. I'd rather have greater variety or be able to feel the difference in the thing that I do. But the fire thing still feels, Electrobolt still goes the same way. And I realize there's some production reality in that and all of that, but it just, I don't know. Numbers, I mean, it's just numbers, and it's kind of like, well, why do I care? I'd rather, a greater payoff from those, or entirely, like, I mean, I love using the insect swarm because they all say really funny things. Like, there are slicers who will say, or splicers rather, who will say, "Oh no, bees, I'm allergic," or whatever, and it's it's funny. It's entertaining, and all that's really good. But and that's good writing and all of that. But I would almost rather there just be just something a little more interesting there in terms of the upgrades. I don't feel any more powerful with the Electrobolt 3 than I felt with the Electrobolt 1, and I'm sure that there are ways that I am, but they are really not telegraphed to me, and I don't feel it when I use it. So not meaningful choices there. And then I think with the tonics, similar thing, right? I think in those cases the previous ones are not become obsolete, so you still have them. You can equip multiple ones if you want to, like, double down. Does it do anything?
Areas.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Does it just take the best number? Like that is a case where the system is very it's very hidden from you what's actually going on. So if I have both armored shells or whatever where I take less damage, I have a 1 and a 2.
Yeah.
Is that better than just having the 2? Don't know.
Yeah.
No way to know. And the fact that they don't just treat those the same way also feels weird. Like,
yeah.
Like, could I buy more armored shells, like have 6 armored shell 2s and take no damage from anything? Like, is that possible?
Yeah.
You don't know. I mean, it's impossible to know, I think that's a real weakness in how some of those things work.
Yeah. It just means the choices you're making don't matter that much, So I actually haven't fooled with my tonics very much at all. I just kind of equip what I've been finding, and I have more than I can use, but I haven't really been min-maxing them. I mean, there's probably an argument to be made, and we talked about this in pre-show. Potentially, if you're playing on the higher difficulties, right, where the game gets much harder and your survivability is much lower, you're probably going to want to min-max a little bit more to really optimize your build, so to speak. but it's even, I think, generous to say that there's builds, to be honest. Like it's a, it's meant to be a fun shooter. So that's fine. And let it be that. So it's sort of like, it's in a bit of a middle gray area, rather than kind of committing to what the legacy is there. So yeah, that's sort of there goes June.
Yep. I get it. I mean, and it's sort of the same way with the guns, as we talked about last time, reflecting basically all the same damage types that that the plasmids do. In fact, in some ways they have more, because not only do they do all the elemental things that your plasmids do, I guess the one thing they don't do is like the mind control type stuff. So the hypnotize and the enrage, that is the one thing the plasmids only do. But a lot of the other things are, like the insect swarm is basically a stun lock. It doesn't do a ton of damage. I don't think I've ever killed anything with that. The cyclone trap, I guess, technically does some damage. It's fun to watch them shoot up into the air, but in a lot of spaces it's too tight for that to really pay off and kind of be fun. So I don't, it's just the things that it does that are weird are only moderately weird. I mean, having an enrage thing or the hypnotize Big Daddy is really just like hacking a turret or a drone. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot fewer axes than appear. So they're just kind of reusing the same stuff over and over in a lot of ways, and not really giving you access to the underlying systems enough to make you at least be able to go and look. Oh, look! It is 15% instead of 10. If they choose 1 and 2 together or something like that. So I don't know. It's thin. Yep.
And as much as this is, as we've talked about this as a sort of a the sort of lineage line of this does continue the shock, the immersive sim and shock sort of category. It definitely, I think I've said even in the first episode, I miss some of the things that they stripped away to accomplish some of their other goals, which they did definitely succeed in. I mean, there's sort of like that. There's a zero-sum sort of situation where if you're going to really heavily focus on the shooter aspect and then maybe heavily focus on the story aspect, which they clearly do, right? So then other things are going to fall away in the natural order of production, and you can't focus on everything all the time. And so so that's makes sense, and I think it's obviously totally fine, and it's still an amazing game in so many ways. So but yeah.
Yep, for sure. Well, I think we actually can take a little time to this other topic, which is the modular construction, because I feel like that modular construction is just as much a part of this type of play that we're describing, where it's like, oh, well, we have this thing that does this, we have the electricity that does this, we have the ice that does that, and we have the bees, which basically do the same as the electricity, more or less, even though they have a nice effect, etc. All of that is sort of modular in the design, but there's also a modular construction to the spaces. And you're a level designer, so I definitely want to throw that. Well, I mean, you were at one time. I know a lot of that is lost to you now, but at one time you were a level designer. Do you want to talk a little bit about that stuff, and then maybe we can turn to feedback?
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge topic. I just wanted to. I think that it's a good example of a game, especially. I think you've made the point that Unreal specifically is this technology is good at, or was and is still good at, instance-based and modular construction of the world. And I think Gears of War is a really good example of that in the sort of same era. And you really like the art direction in this game is so pure and good and consistent that it really can lend itself well to modular building. And so there's a lot of, there's like one simple good example when it comes to streaming in sections of the level, which is obviously a big portion of how they control performance and loading in and memory and all that. The modular hallways that go under the ocean from one pod to another, where you get to see the water, and you're kind of in an aquarium kind of situation, those glass hallways, what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Those are, those all look the same, and then they kind of have some interesting stuff outside that they kind of, again, modularly build to make the ocean floor, but you're always impressed with them, and they fit in really well with the art direction. And then if you go into even like a place like Arcadia versus a place like the Hephaestus, then, you're going to see common elements between those two, even though your memory of Arcadia is that it's, a high vegetation area, blah, blah, blah. And then Hephaestus has the sort of core, but like, the stairs are the same, or, these doors are the same. And this portion of this sort of corner of the room is the same. But it, it's, there's games that have a harder time making modularly built levels, and there's games that lend themselves well to modular levels. And I think the art direction and the construction and the level design and the lighting and everything, really, they did a good job at kind of marrying those goals with the way that the game was built. And so something to I wanted to call out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think presented with a problem of, this is running on the, 360, is that true?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. 2007. Yeah, so you're running on the 360, so you've got the, whatever that was, 512 unified memory, 512 megabytes. So you can spend kind of as much as you want to spend on textures and things like that. I actually think, like, it also makes sense. I mean, we all live with houses with doors that are essentially the same, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, just walking around in the world, you're not going to see a lot of uniqueness in, right? Every manhole cover looks basically the same, right? Or, there's a lot in a lot of our cars. I mean, there's a large number of models of cars, and I guess because we've been making them so long, there can be quite a variety just due to history. But fundamentally, right, this sort of car looks like that sort of car, right? Whatever. So there's a lot of sort of repetition in the real world, the real built world. But and you could definitely understand if under the sea they also have especially those sorts of constraints where they're gonna, why would you make different little sister holes? Although I have to say, what were those for before the little sisters? Like, like, what is, like, don't think about it, I guess. But
no, I think they were like pipe, it's like ventilation pipes or something, you know what I mean? I think the little sisters have utilized those for
they've switched them. Yeah, those are like on the the Marin Civic Center, where there's that big statue at one end where all the outflow, all the outgassing of buildings goes out, that tower or whatever it's called. So that all the different pipes end up there and vent. I guess makes sense somewhat. Maybe I don't know. I don't want to really think about it. It's perfect size for them, so I guess that's fine. Anyway, it is. I mean, I think it makes sense, but I actually think it's extremely well deployed, and I definitely appreciate it. I mean, I've worked on games that have tons of modular construction, Skyrim and Fallout. I mean, it's hard to build games of that size without, repurposing a lot of art, and it does help. It helps a lot to make those things fit and run, but also make them just buildable. So, anyway.
Yeah, I think this one's a masterclass in that kind of situation. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and the art direction is a big part of that for sure. Thinking about what pieces do we really need. I think that's, if you go to like a kit bashing talk or something like that, I have former colleagues who talk about that stuff at GDC and things like that. They'll tell you about, like, this is how you have to break it down, like, to this level of granularity, because you want to be able to do X, Y, or Z, right? It's a fascinating look behind how to actually make games at scale, at this level of quality, AAA quality, etc. So, okay. Well, let's then turn to feedback. Next time, of course, before we get to that, I guess I should say we're going to finish this game. You actually, this time you made up for your past sins and you actually played past where I was. So you're going to be ahead of the game a little bit. But we will, we'll finish the game. We'll go through that final boss fight again. And that may be the point at which I just bump it down to easy because I've played it before. And that'll be okay. But yeah, and folks can join along, and I'm sure there will be other topics that will come up through there for sure. Let us turn to reviews. I want to thank folks for sending reviews. We have actually had a couple over the last couple of weeks. There was one I actually missed last week when we recorded. I did not notice it that it was there, and that's the one that I gave to you, sir.
Okay, review. Are you talking about the review? Yeah, got it.
Yes.
Game Dev Food from Jarko S. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I don't know if that is your real name. I am making my first modest adventure game, and this podcast is very helpful to me. What works, what doesn't, and why. Most helpful so far have been the episodes about Fallout, Baldur's Gate, Diablo, and Final Fantasy VI. Good nostalgia trips too. A lot of weird talk about touching, but other than that, a lot of weird talk about touching. But other than that, this is great stuff. Is there? I guess. Okay.
Well, I wasn't sure about the weird talk about touching, but
I wouldn't completely be. I would not be surprised. So,
that's right. You don't actually listen to the finished product. I mean, because I often take snippets of your voice and put them together, so that you say those sorts of things.
Got it. Yeah, yes. So, okay. All right.
I'm the puppet master.
Now I'm not sure if Jarko actually wrote this review. Now I'm wondering if somebody else wrote this.
That's right. Yeah. Is Jarko an anagram of anything? Right. I don't know. But yeah, listen to the Metal Gear Solid. Well, actually, I think it was the series after that. I can't remember exactly, but I can't believe I got you to sing that. In any case, thank you for that, Jarko. And I have one here from Chris. 3646363. I'm assuming that's not his phone number. If it is, I'm so sorry. If you're like, it says great podcast. If you're like me and you're fed up with gaming podcasts where people give hot takes on the first 2 hours of a game and never go any deeper than that, this might be the podcast for you. No flimsy surface level discussion here, just deep dives on classic games that have had a big influence on the medium over the years. Discussion is insightful, well-informed, and most of all, thorough. The two hosts have a great rapport and are both fantastic to listen to. Overall, just a great podcast for anyone with an interest in games and game design. And I would say that is everything that we are trying to do. So thank you, Chris. And if that is your phone number, again, I do apologize. I suspect not. It looks like maybe just a random number, but who can tell in these troubling times? Yeah, I appreciate both of those reviews. I'm particularly curious about people who listen and go and make stuff. I love that. So hearing Jarko's always, it warms my heart. But we get a number of emails and things like that are along those lines. It's always nice to hear from folks. But yeah, if you're interested in talking at absolute length. We're talking hours about games from the past. We are the podcast for you. So thank you, thank you to both of those folks for the reviews.
Go listen
Apple,
to
podcast system. Yeah,
go listen to the Ocarina of Time series if you want to really see us go
or
too far.
Or RC for that matter.
Yeah,
although in that case we had tons of interviews, so that helps.
Yeah. We stretched that sucker out.
Well, it was the pandemic, you know. Let's relive a different past trauma. Anyway, let's instead now turn to email. This is sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You have one from Mystery Dip.
Good old Mystery Dip. Problems of game preservation from Mystery the Dip. Thanks for joining the stream very often, Mystery. He's been very consistent. Hey, Brett and Tim, I recently came across this set of tweets, link included here, about how some older games were rendered unplayable because an ad server, the code used, stopped providing expected results. While the games in question were able to work again, the continuing march of DRM and online integration will mean fewer games in the future will be able to be enjoyed by gamers after they become a financial liability. What should we do to preserve our gaming for the next generation? Regards, Mystery Dip.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little incentive, unfortunately, to preservation, which is a shame. Like it's just it's expensive to keep them up. I mean, frankly, to keep them running, right? And that's a reason why you're not finding like literally every NES or SNES game available to you other than through illegal means. Of course, in that case, also they're not getting the treatment right necessarily, and you might be getting a fan translation for something that came from elsewhere, etc. There's just not a lot of that, right? And it falls outside the industry to do any of that preservation. Honestly, though, that's not all that different from any other sort of industry. It's just that our medium is so prey to hardware falling apart over the years, becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not unique in that, but we're not far from unique, I would say, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Weird. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know a lot about film preservation, but I do like. This is a good topic because I don't think we've talked about it too much. But for whatever reason, like I think because of my slightly OCD nature, I do think about this more than I probably should and worry about it because I hate the idea of things slipping away forever. And there's already been games that are probably lost, as Mystery's talking about, and we know of some that are lost forever. And film's done a better job, but there's still similar cases there, right? Where there's been reels that.
Sure. I mean, 90% of films before, say, 1915 are gone.
Yeah, right, exactly. And as a related anecdote, my wife, who she's an author by trade, but she's also wanting to be a librarian, so she's taking some library classes to get certified, and she's taking this history of libraries course right now, and telling me about these, about the early days, like I'm talking ancient days of how libraries came to be, and as probably a lot of people know, the conquering group that would come into a territory and take over would replace libraries, books, with their own, and basically destroy the existing civilization that they were taking over. And, I just it gives me highs to think about like what's been lost, and I don't know where my point is going here, but I'm just saying obviously it's been a problem forever. And I mean, for our industry, one thing I think Phil Spencer recently, there was a soundbite from him about talking about game preservation. I think one thing that I hope that can be done is I think we need more leaders like Phil who are I don't know if he's following that up or backing that up with any action, but I think it's good at least that he's saying things to the public of we have a preservation problem in games and we need to do something about it. So I think one solution is I'd like to see more leaders who can set aside efforts, but whether that's budgets or resources or something to do something about it. And there are a few out there that do that and have even retired and kind of have made game preservation kind of their post-retirement hobby and such. But we need people to step up who actually have power to do something about it. So that would be one thing that I think would be nice to see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that archive.org has done a lot of work to preserve old PC libraries. So a lot, there's a virtual Apple basically implementation there. So things are being preserved through emulation. There's not a lot to do about the literal hardware obsolescence because these systems are very different and they break, right? I mean, they don't have an unlimited shelf life, right? I mean, a book is a very versatile and resilient technology because you can easily reproduce that, that experience. And there's a real epistemological question about like, what is the book? Like, is the book is just the words, right, in the order that they're in, and not probably entirely. It's an unresolved philosophical question, I would say. But what is the book, right? Is the sort of question. Well, with the game, it's clearly like, it's not just the string of ones and zeros, right? It's also the medium that it had to run on, also the television, right? The monitor, if it was not a television. But people talk a lot about it, and we've had people reply with the Final Fantasy VI art, I think, in particular, of what that looks like on a modern flat screen versus how it actually looked on a curved CRT, right? With scanline. So I don't know, that's why I do think it's not exactly unique, but not far from unique. That's what I meant by that. It's just really, really hard to do, and that takes a lot of resources that I just don't think are there. I mean, I would love to be able to call up a library of games, that just have anything to do tangentially with things that I work on, just so I could look at them and understand them. And that's just very, very hard to do. Really the resources that we have are really the people who have played the games. We're lucky in the last, 10 years that streaming and live plays, let's plays, etc., have been such a thing, because that does, you're not able to play it, but you can at least see it being played, and for those of us who have long gaming histories, you can sort of look at that and go, oh, right, okay, I remember what this felt like to play. Like, I saw a Vectrex image recently. I was like, oh yeah, I remember what it felt like to play a Vectrex, and how different that looked. For example, another obsolescent, hardware. Like, not a lot of those left out there, I'm sure. And they had some weird choices that they made with like overlays and stuff. I mean, just really interesting piece of hardware. Always kind of curious about things like that. Anyway, we can try to hold on to the stuff we took to make the game. I would love, honestly, I've always thought it'd be really cool to, and the Double Fine adventure documentary was really good about this, of sort of documenting the actual process of how a particular game was made, or particular games were made, is super interesting to me. Like, we have a ton of data that we don't really use in any way, but like, we run source control systems which literally have how the game changed day to day over years and by whom. And it's really hard to capture that, but I bet there are ways. Like, and it's not my field to know how to do that, but I bet there are ways. And I don't know. I think that's super interesting, to talk about, even just like the processes and how things evolve and stuff like that is also super interesting. I just wish all of it were more available. So I've often wanted to lean on that to justify choices that I make, as a technical leader. Like, no, we're doing this because this was what we've seen before happen. We're choosing to do this. We're choosing to be, to make this, make the tools more stable, because otherwise the velocity of check-ins and changes slows down considerably. That one's pretty easy to draw a line on, but there might be other things that are harder. So anyway. So that's a lot of thoughts, but thanks for writing in, Mystery Dip.
Yep, it's a good topic.
Yeah, for sure. And I do wish we did more. It's actually come up a lot in a couple different contexts recently. There's been some Square re-releases, I think, of like Final Fantasy 1. I think like 1, 2, and 3 maybe are being re-released, but also like The Matrix with the new movie coming out. The Matrix Online is unplayable, and yet there's a huge story implication that is canon because the Wachowskis were involved with The Matrix Online.
Yeah.
That nobody can experience because there are no servers. I mean, these are tough things. For somebody who wants to get into, who is introduced to the Matrix now, and wants to go back and relive everything, they can't. It's not possible. It probably will never be possible. I know people have tried to recreate that, but that's just not going to happen. So it's sad. I don't know. I wish companies were also better about just saying, you know what, we're at a point where let's hand this off to a community, and as long as the community wants to keep it alive, keep it alive. I know that's happened with Meridian 59, that Andrew Kermsey and his brother worked on, Christopher, that, they've open sourced it and are letting people run their own servers. And there's probably 200 people who play Meridian 59. But that's 200 people who are keeping a game alive that, would not be playable otherwise and is important to MMO history, so.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, that's an example of, I think, a leader just jumping in and two leaders and getting the rights to do so. And then just finding a solution to keep it alive, in a safe manner. So yeah, I think that'd be a good case study especially for online based games.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, that does it for our show. Thanks again for sending those emails and reviews through to the podcast infrastructure that you use. If we don't read it on the air, we do love to, so send it to us if we don't pick it up. I mostly get the Apple ones. And of course, the email at devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Which is where you also stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. You are currently trying to help out the Bureau of Control with its issue, trying to help out the board there.
Yep, I'm not so sure about the board yet, but I'm definitely trying to help out the Bureau. The secrets are being revealed slowly to me. It's still an amazing game, amazing place, fascinating to play. It's not running the best that I would like it to run, but my computer's a little bit older, but not too bad. But so that's been a little bit frustrating. But otherwise, yeah, it's been fun. So come if you want to see some craziness. If you don't know that game, or if you do know that game, see my reactions to the craziness. So it's quite cool game.
There are definitely sections where I was like, oh man, I can't wait to hear from Tim about what's happening here. So
yeah, the motel was a great section. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to go back to that
recently. Yeah, I love that, and it made me point out the room or the lost room. I think we talked about it last week. Or recently anyway. A wild miniseries that definitely feels like it's going to that same hotel or a similar hotel. I guess that hotel is outdoors, like it's not a hallway. It's distinct rooms that are together. Anyway, yeah, you know what I mean, like a motel. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun irritating your neighbors with the bees that pour out of your hands this week, and good night.
Good night.
No apiaries in the backyard for me. I just carry them around with me.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a honey of an ability.
Boy, you're just stacking them up now.
Yep.